Okay, here's my key theorist presentation. I had a lot of technical difficulties doing it, so I'm just going to voice over because it did not save my audio. So I did my presentation on Albert Bandura. So a little bit about Albert. He was born in Mundare, Canada, and he's still alive today at the age of 94 years old. Something I found very interesting about him is he attended a very small school. It was the only school in their whole town. So it was K through 12, and there was only like 2 teachers running it. They only had 1 textbook for each subject, so all the students had to share the textbook, and they just did not have the proper resources. And Albert felt that they were often they had to fend for themselves in terms of learning, and this did later inspire him and his theory. So the social cognitive theory is the theory that he developed. So here's like a good definition of it that was found in a sketch about him. This theory accords a central role to cognitive, vicarious, self-regulatory, and self-reflective processes in human adaptation and change. Social cognitive theory is rooted in an energetic perspective. In this view, people are self-organizing, proactive, self-reflecting, and self-regulating, not just reactive organisms shaped and shepherded by environmental forces or driven by concealed inner impulses. Human functioning is the product of a dynamic interplay of personal, behavioral, and environmental influences. So I know that's just a lot of words, so we'll kind of break it down. So what it means is people do not all grow and learn in the same phases. And I thought this was interesting because we learned about Jean Piaget's theory, and it was pretty set on like 4 distinct phases that the typical child will go through. But this theory says the opposite of that. And it says people are products of their environment. So what's going on around them will affect how they learn and grow. People will react differently to to the same situations. So, for example, you could be you're teaching a class of 30, you're giving the information the same way to everybody, but the way that each child will perceive that and react to that information will be different. And people are self-functioning and capable of many things, and people carefully decide and consider choices before taking an action. So I think this is really important because it proves that we're not just like wired to react a certain way. We can actually carefully think about our decisions and consequences of those decisions, and therefore take an action which makes sense. And I really liked this little visual about it. So in the center here we have human behavior and what determines it. And on the outside squares we have the different factors. So the first category is cognitive factors, which is knowledge, expectations, and attitudes. And then down in the other, this corner, we have behavioral factors, which are skills, practice, and self-efficacy. I think that's a lot of what we'll see in schools, practicing our skills, growing confident in them. And then environmental factors, which is social norms, access in communities, and influence on others. And I think it's really important to recognize that all of these factors play into how a human behaves. It's not just one category of factors. So it has its contributions and limitations. So behavioral this side's contributions here. Behavioral capability, and that is just the simple idea of knowing how to do something. So it's important that we teach our students, but it's also important that we ensure they know how to do it. And then observational learning, and that's when students learn simply through watching and then doing it themselves. Reinforcements, which is just practice, and that kind of goes along with self-efficacy. So we can determine whether the student will be confident enough to do that action again based on how they react to the situation. So I think a lot of it is just about practicing until the student gets it right. And then on here we have our limitations. So this theory suggests that when an environment changes, behavior will change, which is not necessarily true. Just because the student's environment around them changes doesn't mean that the way they learn will totally flip and it'll be flipped upside down. So that was one critique of this. And also the structure is quite loosely organized, so it doesn't really go into depth about how each factor affects human behavior. It kind of just talks about that it does. It doesn't talk about how. And then the last one is disregards biological or hormonal factors, because many of these theories suggest, like other learning theories, they suggest that there are biological factors that go into play, and this one does not suggest that. So, and then I thought of some applications we can do for teaching. So just know that every child will learn differently. So it's important that we incorporate different learning styles into our classroom. Be mindful of the child's environment outside of school. School's not their whole life. They don't spend their whole life there. And the things that happen outside of school will impact their learning. So I think it's important to be aware of what your students are going through. And then keep practicing until your students are confident in the skill. This theory I felt like really reinforced that it's really important for the students to be confident in it. And then here are just my 2 resources that I used. Thanks for watching.